Ultrakill is a game that needs no introduction. But this is a review, so I'm going to introduce it anyway. If you enjoy incredibly fast-paced games, then Ultrakill is probably a game for you. This game is blisteringly fast-paced at a high level, with split-second decisions being the difference between a P rank and getting turned into a red mist. This game actively and openly tracks your performance with the in-game style meter and timer, letting you know in real time how well you're performing. The process of improving in Ultrakill is managing to figure out how to keep a high style meter while also completing each level in as little time as possible. And because of the real-time feedback, the game makes it incredibly easy to test and figure out what strategies work best for each encounter in the game. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys improving their skills in the game, this feature is a godsend. With a seemingly never-ending rabbit hole of movement options and weapon interactions, the game is designed to be played in an almost infinite number of different ways, and no two players will approach an encounter in exactly the same way, which gives Ultrakill a huge sense of personal achievement whenever you manage to figure out how to clear a room that's been beating your ass for the past 15 minutes. Speaking of getting your ass beat, isn't Ultrakill supposed to be really hard? Ultrakill has a reputation for being a difficult game, but is that really true? Well, yes and no. Ultrakill can become a very challenging game, but only if you choose to make it that way. Currently, there are 5 different difficulty modes to choose from, with the 6th one to be released later on. When talking about Ultrakill's difficulty, most people are talking about playing the game on either violent or brutal difficulty. And put simply, yes, these are hard. Brutal especially will challenge players that have fully 100% beaten violent mode, and violent itself is absolutely not a cakewalk. Often forgotten are Ultrakill's other difficulties. Most players never move past standard difficulty, much to the community's horror. Standard offers a more accessible experience while keeping the game as quite the challenge for most people, but even this is still considered as hard by the game itself. If you simply don't enjoy challenging games, don't play FPS games, or for any other reason either don't want to or can't play Ultrakill at a higher difficulty, then there's still harmless and lenient modes for you to play on. These modes offer completely unrestricted access to what you can actually do in the game. Anything you can do on brutal can also be done on harmless. These modes just make the enemies slower and easier to counter. Ultrakill is an incredibly accessible game. While absolutely earning its reputation as a difficult game, can be enjoyed by anyone at any skill level. The difficulty is set by you, and can be further fine-tuned and adjusted using the in-game assist options, which can slow the game down, offer aim assist, make the game less visually cluttered, and so on. This isn't Dark Souls. If you don't want to be playing ADHD Simulator like I do in my videos, then you don't have to. You can enjoy Ultrakill however you choose to enjoy Ultrakill. This is going to be a long one. As of making this video, Ultrakill recently received the full arsenal update, which added in the last few weapons the game was missing. Almost. Currently, Ultrakill has 5 different weapon types, with each weapon type having 3 different variants. There's also 3 different arms with 1 yet to be released, and on top of that, the revolver, shotgun, and nail gun all have 3 more alternate variants, which I will talk about in a bit. At a surface level, all of these weapons have their own use cases and merits, with there being a decent amount of interactions across weapon variants. With the exception of the nail gun, none of the weapons feel underpowered, and all of them have their own use cases. For a first playthrough of the game, you'll probably spend your time getting to grips with the basics of the weapons, thinking that the coins suck because they're hard to hit, figuring out a couple of basic pieces of tech and weapon interactions, and maybe figuring out that you can jump onto your own rockets. Ultrakill's weapon arsenal doesn't fully reveal itself until you delve much deeper into the more niche interactions of each weapon. Once you learn how how to properly utilize coins, you might discover that throwing a coin behind an enemy and shooting it with a rail cannon is a good idea, or that throwing coins into a sharpshooter beam makes it bounce around more. You might discover that rockets are attracted to magnets, or that you can juggle a chainsaw while still using your other weapons. Starting to discover basic pieces of tech like core nuking, rail coining, and ultra ricochet opens the door to fully realizing just how deep the weapon interactions of Ultrakill go. I've barely even scratched the surface here. I mean, you have dead coining or core hammering a rocket, or even something as stupid as rail slap coin punching or whatever this is called. The amount of silly weapon interactions this game has is insane, and new techs are still being discovered all the time, and I haven't even mentioned the arms yet. Arms add yet another layer onto how you play the game, with the feedbacker, the blue arm, allowing you to parry projectiles and many melee attacks for a full stamina and health regen. It also lets you punch coins, shotgun pellets, the chainsaw and cannonball, which then just leads to all sorts of unique tricks to rack up damage. The Knuckle Blaster is just free damage simulator, with the added bonus of a shockwave to blast projectiles or enemies out of the way. This weapon is absolutely sworn by high level players in the game, but it's something that does take a lot of getting used to, and you might not find it that useful when you're just learning the basics of the game. And then the Whiplash is a literal grappling hook, which yet again opens up a whole new layer of different ways to brutally murder everything on your screen in exchange for building up hard damage if you want at full health. I can't believe people complain about this. It would be so overpowered if it didn't do this. All of this is possible, and I've hardly even mentioned the alternate weapons, and that's because, to be honest, they're a bit of a mixed bag. The alternate revolver is almost a straight upgrade over the default revolvers. Some people will probably bitch in the comments about how that's wrong, and actually the standard ones are good because, yeah, shut up. You will be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't at least use the alternate piercer, and even then, a large amount of players will use the alternate sharpshooter, and I personally think, since the recent buff where it spins up instantly, it's just straight up better than the default sharpshooter. The only alternate revolver that isn't arguably better than the standard revolver is the alternate marksman. But even then, recently the alternate marksman got a very substantial buff that made it a very solid weapon in its own right. But fine, if you don't agree with me when I say the alternate revolvers are a straight upgrade, then you can't deny that the Sawblade launcher is blatantly overpowered. The red nail gun may technically be stronger than its Sawblade counterpart, but the combination of default and overheat Sawblade launcher is just flat out broken. This circle will wipe out an entire room on its own. It absolutely melts even the strongest of bosses, and it takes no skill to perform. I don't dislike saw traps, as this is known, but I can't ignore how strong they are. They are a must-have for almost any room, any boss, because they output so much damage for such little investment. They are not a choice. You will place down a saw trap in this room. It's not a choice, it's something that you will do. There is no reason to not place down a saw trap. The only downside is they provide relatively little style, but for the benefit they provide, this means absolutely nothing. Saw traps can deal with swarms of little enemies, it can deal with much tankier enemies, they provide immense healing over a large area, essentially doing the screwdriver's job better than the screwdriver. They are overpowered, and I hope something is done in the future to tone them back, since a saw trap will absolutely trivialize pretty much everything in the game. Now you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned the alternate shotgun in this section, and that is simply because I don't like it very much. I don't use it, I don't know much about it. It's certainly not a bad weapon, it's got a lot of its own tech, and it's very powerful, but I personally just prefer having 3 shotguns to swap through, and this is part of the beauty of Ultrakill's weapons. You don't have to use every weapon in the game. It's better if you do, sure, but if you don't want to use a weapon, then you don't have to. It's your choice what you use, your choice how you play, your choice to delve into some of the techs I mentioned, or to simply ignore them and play the game in your own way. The true genius of Ultrakill's arsenal is the freedom that it gives you to play however you want to play. The enemy design in Ultrakill is pretty good. The enemies in Ultrakill are sort of soft sorted into different groups. There are fodder enemies like Filth and Strays, some slightly stronger enemies that appear less frequently, like Cerberus and Virtues, and then there are the very rare enemies like Swords Machines, Mind Flayers and Hideous Masses. Typically, an encounter will have a large number of fodder enemies placed around the arena, usually projectile enemies placed around the edges, and then some tankier uncommon enemies more towards the centre. The way the enemies and encounters are designed is to get you to target the strongest enemies first. A huge part of getting better at Ultrakill is figuring out which enemies take the highest priority to kill. You'll often see tier lists of what enemies take highest priority, and while in a vacuum you can say, oh, this enemy is more important than this one, during actual gameplay, the question of what enemy you need to kill first is heavily dependent on the layout of the room and what enemies are inside it. The answer to what enemies should you kill first is different for every encounter, but with that being said, there are still certain absolutes within the enemy design. A Virtue is more important than a Stray, a Mind Flayer is more important than a Cerb. Every enemy in the game is a threat in its own way. Even the fodder enemies dish out a lot of damage and their damage can easily add up. So while some enemies take priority over others, you can't ignore any enemies in the game. They're all a threat in their own way. Some enemies in the game exist purely to buff other enemies. Stalkers and Idols hardly directly attack you at all. Idols literally just sit there and do nothing. But their danger comes from the fact that they directly buff other enemies. Idols make the highest tier enemy in the room completely invincible, and can only be destroyed by a physical attack, so they are incredibly dangerous. But this is balanced out by the fact that an idol will give you a full heal when destroyed. Stalkers will walk around and sand any enemies it can get close to. Sanded enemies don't let you heal by shooting them. Having enemies get sanded is really bad, but it's not the end of the world as parries will still fully heal you. The point I'm trying to get here is every enemy has their threats, but they also have substantial counterplay and ways to mitigate their threat. There really isn't an enemy in Ultrakill that I would consider as badly designed, which is a huge accolade to be able to give a game. Yeah, best bosses in gaming. No, this isn't true. The bosses in Ultrakill are mostly good, yes, but they definitely have their flaws, and some of the bosses just kind of stink. The first boss in the game literally becomes a standard common enemy just 2 levels later, with V2 being the first proper boss. V2 is a good boss fight. He's small, he's fast, which really trips up a lot of new players as he can be really hard to hit without a lot of practice. Balanced out by his low health pool, I think V2 is a very solid boss fight. Nothing too fancy, but definitely not bad. The rematch takes everything good about V2, and then just adds on top of it, so that also is definitely a very good boss fight. The Corpse of King Minos fight is just kind of okay. The fight is cool, parrying his punches is really satisfying, but the fight is very shallow compared to other fights in the game. Parry punch, move around so black hole doesn't touch you, and dodge the occasional projectile in phase 2. It's not exactly what I would class as an amazing boss, it's just okay. Both of the Gabriel encounters are good boss fights. Gabriel is fast, decently tanky, and has a lot of really unique attacks, especially in his first encounter. I think the difficulty is a bit wonky on these fights, as I genuinely believe that Gabriel 1 is a harder fight than Gabriel 2, which is backwards, but it's a minor gripe I have with the Gabriel fights, and I think overall they are really solid boss fights. Leviathan sucks. It has 3 attacks. I do not like this boss. And then the Earth Mover Brain is definitely not a great boss fight. It has spinning lasers and 1 projectile it throws at you, and occasionally goes invincible if you're slow. It's very one-dimensional in its attacks. The level of 7-4 itself is a very good level. I love the concept of the Earth Mover, but the brain fight is very underwhelming. The bosses only really start to get great when you get to the spoiler part of the game. If you somehow haven't heard or seen of Ultrakill before this, then this is your warning that I'm going to talk about the secret endgame bosses. Yeah? Enough warning? Okay. Flesh Prison sucks. I hate this fucking rotated cube, but that's not why we're here. We're here because of Minos Prime and he's dead. Okay, well if we don't insta-kill him, Minos Prime is the best boss in the game so far. He is incredibly fast, he has incredibly powerful attacks, and he will definitely kick your ass the first few times you fight him. Minos will shout out most of the attacks he does before he actually performs them, meaning that his far greater speed doesn't feel unfair, as you will usually get an audio cue as to what is about to kill you. Most of his attacks are parryable until the second phase, where he then becomes mostly unparryable in higher difficulties. Minos Prime is a great boss fight, but unfortunately, at a high level you can easily deal enough damage to kill him in mere seconds. So that's why I love Sisyphus Prime even more. Sisyphus is like Minos, but better. He's faster, stronger, and crucially, he has more HP, so you can't just delete him from the game. Sisyphus also has much greater focus on parrying than Minos, which I think makes the fight flow a lot better. Sisyphus is easily the best boss in Ultrakill in my eyes. Both Sisyphus and Minos show that Ultrakill can have some incredible boss fights when it wants to, but they also just make the contrast between some of the weaker bosses that much greater. I'm not saying every fight should be like these two, because admittedly they are very similar, and too many similar boss fights would get incredibly boring, but I do hope that the Fraud boss, the final Gabriel encounter, and the P-3 boss all close out Ultrakill with some strong fights, because this game does have its hits with its bosses, but it also has some serious shits. I mentioned earlier the game's style meter and how it's a real-time measure of how well you're playing the game. Well, this is only sort of true. The style meter works by giving you points based on how fancy the methods you use to kill enemies are. For example, shooting an enemy in the head will give you more points than shooting its body. And for another example, putting an enemy in a sword trap and hitting with an ult, you get the idea. More flashy plays equals more points. But what does this actually do? Well, the style meter has both an intrinsic and extrinsic factor as to why you should care about it. Intrinsically, more style points means you'll get a higher level rank. An S rank in style is required for a P rank in a level, so I guess it's more like 50-50 intrinsic, extrinsic, whatever. Point is, this doesn't actually help you when you're playing the game. What does help you, however, is the higher style ranks reduce how long you have hard damage for. To briefly explain what hard damage is, every time you take damage, 35% of that damage is taken as hard damage, which temporarily caps your maximum HP. This is very bad, and the build-up of hard damage will almost certainly lead to your death. The style meter steps in here, with high style ranks reducing the amount of time hard damage lasts for. With the highest rank, Ultrakill, yeah, that's the name of the game, the highest rank completely removes all hard damage. This is incredibly powerful, and makes getting and maintaining a high style rank an incredibly important thing to do when playing the game. Obviously, something this powerful must be balanced out, and Ultrakill has several different methods of balancing the reward of the style meter with enough risk. For example, the style meter is constantly draining passively, and it drains faster the higher your rank is. This means you need to work and perhaps perform some risky plays to keep your style meter as high as possible, instead of playing it safe and holding back. Second, as you use a weapon, its style bonus will decrease until eventually dropping to 0. This forces you to mix and match your weapons and use your entire arsenal, or else you'll lose out on your style. And third, every hit you take will instantly drop you a whole style rank, so if you get hit a lot, your style will drop through the floor, which heavily disincentivizes tanking encounters. All of this not only rewards you for playing well, but it also nudges you into learning how to dodge or parry attacks and use all of your weapons instead of sticking to 1 or 2 comfort weapons, and overall, I think is absolutely a great system. But even great systems have their flaws. I said that the style meter rewards stylish play, but what the game considers as stylish often deviates from what a person would consider as stylish. Often the most efficient and flashy method of clearing a level will leave you scrambling for style in order to get that S rank, despite it looking amazing. And if you want to farm style to get as much points as possible, well, it becomes a game of figuring out what gives you the most style points and then just spamming the 1 or 2 moves that does. This was a problem beforehand with projectile boosting, where shotgun swapping would mean that you didn't really lose your style bonus, and projectile boosting itself would give you a huge amount of style. The balance of what looks stylish compared to what the game actually considers as stylish is a very difficult thing to get right, and is something that has been addressed by the developers in the past, with shotgun swapping being nerfed, for example. But I don't think that balance is quite right yet. It's close, and for the most part this isn't an issue, but I hope that a little more tweaking is done to refine the last rough edges of this otherwise amazing system. It's called a movement shooter for a reason. Ultrakill has no shortage of ways to move around, from bombastic ways to cross entire levels in one go, to being able to space around the million different projectiles thrown at you in the cybergrind. The bread and butter of Ultrakill's movement is dashing and sliding. Dashing gives you a quick burst of speed that also gives you brief invincibility frames for dodging, but it resets your momentum. This can be both a good and a bad thing. It can be good to normalise your air momentum and cancel out a huge amount of knockback that you otherwise wouldn't want, or it can screw you over after core nuking. Sliding is a more consistent form of movement. It lowers your profile and makes you move across the floor at a higher speed than walking, but constantly sliding is a really bad idea because you can't recover stamina while sliding, and you need stamina in order to dash. The solution to this problem is to mix and match your movement options. Combining a dash with a slide will let you keep your dashing speed for slightly longer, meaning you don't just slide for as long. Take this a step further and jump after dashing, then slide and jump whenever you hit the floor, and you'll actually start gaining speed. Just like the weapons, Ultrakill's movement mechanics can all be combined together to create new gameplay mechanics. Combine a ground slam with a wall jump, and you can go to space. Throw in a slide, and you can go to space again, but also with a huge amount of forward momentum. Slam on the ground after jumping, and you can jump higher. Do it again and again and again to gain height. Replace one of those jumps with a slide, and shoot off at high speeds. The wealth of different movement options presented in Ultrakill comes from a relatively small amount of ways to move around. And I haven't even mentioned all of the movement mechanics that come directly from your weapons. Sometimes it does miss, however. Wall sliding got added recently, and my question is, why? This mechanic just isn't useful at all. It's less useful than even the nichest of movement mechanics that utilize your weapons. Maybe it will become useful in the last 2 layers of the game, but even then, a good mechanic isn't useful for just 20% of a game. It feels like a last minute addition just because it could be added. It doesn't interact with any other mechanics, and it's really hard to initiate a wall slide because you can't slide in the air. It's not a disadvantage, it's not a bad thing to have in the game, but I just question why it's in the game. For the most part though, the movement in Ultrakill feels amazing, and absolutely hits the nail on the head. Ultrakill isn't exactly known for its story. I get this is pretty ironic coming from the guy who made an hour-long video talking about the game's lore, but in reality, most people who play this game will never even get close to discovering even a tiny fraction of the lore. If you play your games because of their story, then I honestly can't recommend Ultrakill to you. During the main game, the story is incredibly surface level and kind of lame. Gabriel get angry, Gabriel does reflection, Gabriel changes mindset. Oh wow, how brave. Yes, there is a neat lore to delve into, but if you don't play this game for an obscene amount of time, if you don't do every secret, explore every nook and cranny of every level, you simply won't be able to piece together the lore of this game. And heaven forbid you dare go and make up your own theories about the story, because odds are, the moment you tell anyone about it, you'll get called an idiot and told to go watch the 7-hour dev stream for a single line of dialogue. That's not even a personal jab. When I got told to do it, it was fair enough because I had made a video about it and got on a pretty substantial point wrong. But I have seen so many people who try sharing their theories about this game's story get completely shut down because it's just wrong or it's stupid. Now this isn't an issue with the game itself, this is more of an issue with the game's community. And usually when reviewing a game, I feel that the community shouldn't be brought up as it's not technically part of the game. But Ultrakill is unfortunately a different story. This isn't a new statement. The Ultrakill community is shit. Now I'm not saying that every Ultrakill player is terrible and ruining the game, because that isn't true. Most of the people who play this game and interact with it outside of the game itself are amazing. This is true for any community. Ultrakill is ruined by an incredibly vocal minority of people who ruin it for everyone else. You know there is an issue with the community when there are several videos out there from several large creators talking about how they love the game but want nothing to do with it because of the community. If you are interested in getting Ultrakill, I would seriously recommend against interacting with the community directly, because of how many people are just so put off by the game. This isn't an issue with Ultrakill. The game is no worse because of this, but I'm just putting this out there as a health warning. Interact with the community at your own risk. Going back to the actual game now, with the game's music. It's pretty good. There are some incredible tracks in this game like Altars of Apostasy, Deep Blue, War, and the list goes on. I personally have a large number of music from Ultrakill in my playlist, which is saying something because of how little songs are actually in there. That's not to say that every single song in the game is an absolute 10 out of 10 masterpiece, however. I mean seriously, you cannot tell me that this is good. A lot of people will say that Ultrakill's music is all amazing and it can do no wrong, which, to be fair, is a subjective opinion on a subjective topic. My subjective opinion is that Ultrakill's music is overall good. Just like with some of the bosses, there are some hits and there are some shits. Some of the music is incredible, some is awful, and a lot of the music is just kind of there. I know a lot of people who don't play the game with music at all. This isn't Celeste levels of soundtrack quality, but that's hardly a criticism. Odds are there will be at least a few songs that you find appealing. Since Ultrakill does have a decently significant modding scene, I thought I may as well mention it. The modding scene for Ultrakill is definitely a bonus to the game if you're into that kind of thing. You can get dozens of custom levels, weapons, and enemies. There are even mods that you play as some of the enemies. Sort of. The vast majority of the mods in this game are complete shitposts, but that's true of any game, and personally, I don't see that as a bad thing at all. If you want to get more content out of Ultrakill, then there are plenty of mods that will do that for you, and as a bonus, it's really easy to install mods with R2 Modman or Thunderstore. The modding scene for Community absolutely enhances the game in almost every way. There is so much that I haven't touched on in this review. I mean seriously, I could go on for hours about every minute detail about this game, but this video is getting long enough. Wow, nobody has ever said that before, how original. Overall, Ultrakill is an amazing game. I wouldn't have put so much time into it if it wasn't. It's definitely one of my personal all-time favourite games, but that's not saying that I think it's perfect. Hell, some of my favourite games are Breath of the Wild and Mario and Luigi Dream Team, and those games absolutely have their own flaws. Ultrakill is a game of incredibly high highs and lows that in the grand scheme of things are more of a smudge on an otherwise polished game. Since people like a number score, I'd give Ultrakill a solid 8.5 out of 10. Certainly an incredible game despite its minor flaws, and if you liked fast-paced games or shooters, it's an absolute must try. Funny Finish Fumo Man cooked here.